Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be recapping Day 4 of the second round of the NHL playoffs. And starting off, it was Game 2 between the Lightning and the Bruins. The Lightning were looking to get on the board in this series and tie it up, and that's exactly what they would end up do with a 4-3 overtime victory. This one started off with a Ritchie goal for the Boston Bruins, a bit of a controversial one. Many people thinking that this one could have been called off. Many people thinking that this should have stuck as a goal. It ended up sticking as a goal. Personally, I thought it could have definitely been called off. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but in the end it stuck as the 1-0 goal. And then soon after, it looked as though the Lightning had tied it up, and yet it was called off for the offside, and this one was absolutely not negotiable. This was absolutely offside, but still, two calls going against the Lightning early in this game, but they did not fall apart at that point, which goes credit to the Lightning. They end up eventually getting the tying goal from Blake Coleman. The Bruins would then take another lead with the 2-1 goal from Marchand. Then it would be tied up by Kucherov before Coleman would actually get the lead for the Lightning. Eventually Marchand would tie it up again. We'd head to overtime, and it would be Palat's first of these playoffs to get the victory, and the Lightning remain undefeated in overtime in these playoffs. Good news for the Lightning. I had said that at the end of the first game, the Lightning were looking solid, and they needed to carry that momentum from late in that first game into this second game, and that's exactly what they managed to do. They were the better team for the majority of this game, which is a good credit to them considering how good the Boston Bruins have looked throughout these playoffs. Vasilevsky managed to outduel Yaroslav Halak. The Lightning still remain clutch when it comes to the overtimes, and so just a solid game from the Tampa Bay Lightning all around. The only bad news that I have to point to for this Lightning team is that they continue to struggle with this first line of the Boston Bruins. They've really been the line that have stood out so much. Marchand, yes, one of these was on the power play, but a couple of goals here tonight. This is something that they're absolutely going to be needing to shut down. The Boston Bruins' depth hasn't really made too much of an appearance thus far in this series. They did get this one goal from Ritchie, but once that depth does manage to catch up a bit, if this first line for the Boston Bruins continues its production as such and the Lightning are unable to shut that down, the Lightning could be in some trouble moving forward. But right now it's looking like this series is absolutely going to go the distance as many appeared. These games have been very close. The good news for the Boston Bruins is that consistently in these playoffs, not counting the round robin, of course, when they even have lost games, which has only been a couple of times, those games have been extremely winnable. They've been very close. Obviously, this one was in overtime. The one game they lost to the Hurricanes was just by a single goal. The Boston Bruins, even when not at their best, have been managing to stay in games, which is a huge advantage in the playoffs. You don't want to be the team that gets completely blown out, and the Boston Bruins have not yet been that team, which is a great thing for them, so that it just goes to show that there are games, even when the Bruins aren't playing well, that they will be able to win in, which is a huge advantage for them. The bad news for the Bruins is that this is going to be a series that is so close that the smallest of mistakes will be punished, or the smallest mistake can be punished and can be the difference maker in some of these games. We saw in Game 1, it was Victor Hedman making a crucial mistake on the third goal for the Bruins that ended up being the game winner. And here tonight, just a couple of errors from Boston Bruins players. They really just got lost in front of the net. Poor coverage in front of the net on this overtime goal from Palat. I mean, the fact that Zach Bogosian is able to actually deke through your two defensemen, being Krug and Clifton, for this Blake Coleman goal is just unbelievable. You cannot let that happen. No offense to Zach Bogosian. And so it's these small errors that are really going to add up with the Bruins. It did that for the Bruins tonight, and it's something the Bruins will have to watch out for. Also, I should mention Halak. I continue to harp on this, that he does seem to be the potential weak link here for the Boston Bruins. He was not particularly good here tonight. That third goal by the Lightning, the one that's the second from Coleman, was not a good one. This one should not be able to squeak through here, and maybe he should be doing a bit of a better job on this overtime goal. So right now, a couple of costly mistakes for this, but again, the series will go long almost certainly. And the second game of the night was Golden Knights versus Canucks. The Canucks were looking to at least improve off of their awful performance in Game 1, where they were just completely shut down 5-0. And not only did they look better, but they actually managed to win the game and tie up this series with a 5-2 victory. This one starts quite early on with a Toffoli goal, his first game since game 1 against the Wild all the way back at the start of August. Then Horvat would make it 2-0, Tuck would make it 2-1 and make it interesting, but then Pettersson and Horvat would make it 3 and 4-1 respectively. Pacioretty would get a late third period goal, but it would be for naught as Pearson would close it out with the empty netter, and the Canucks would win 5-2. And the good news for the Canucks is that they got back to this Canucks identity that we have seen throughout these entire playoffs. They have not been winning games off of stingy defense like a team like the Islanders. They have not been winning games through four-line contributions necessarily like we may have seen from the Golden Knights themselves. It has been the mark of the Canucks to get outstanding goaltending from Markstrom and outstanding performances from their top players, and that was the case here tonight. This is why they won. Markstrom was almost a brick wall here tonight. And Horvat was very good. Toffoli was very good in his return. Pettersson has been one of the best forwards in the playoffs thus far. I believe he's only second in points behind Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche. And so the Canucks, they come back and it's a big, big win. They go back to what was winning them games against the St. Louis Blues. Were they the better team here tonight against the Golden Knights? That's arguable. But in the end, it's the scoreboard that matters and they get the 5-2 victory. But that does bring us to the bad news, is that were they really the better team? Obviously, they gave up, I believe, 40-plus shots to the Golden Knights, and the Canucks actually set a franchise record with 40-plus blocked shots here tonight. And normally, getting so many blocked shots is something that you can say, like, oh, great play by the Canucks to really sacrifice the body to get these victories, and that's true. But what it also goes to show is that the Canucks did not have that much possession in this game. The Golden Knights were firing a lot of shots on net, and as I said, it took Markstrom being extremely good in this game and this sacrificing of the bodies from the Canucks forwards and defensemen to actually end up getting this victory. It's not really a sustainable way of playing, so we'll see if the Canucks can maybe, like they did in the St. Louis Blues series, ramp up a bit and maybe clean their act up a bit in the defensive zone. On the Golden Knights side, their good news is really the same thing as the Canucks' bad news, is that they did play pretty well here tonight. It wasn't an awful game by any means. You know, they end up losing, but it's still tied 1-1, and we know that when the Golden Knights are really at the height, they can win this series, they can win games here, and they can dominate the Canucks. It just wasn't necessarily there. They couldn't really force the subject here in this second game. The bad news for the Golden Knights is I'm not entirely sure if this is a trend, but you take a look at their first series against the Blackhawks in Game 1, it was very similar to this one. They came out, they dominated the Blackhawks. It wasn't a complete domination like this Game 1 against the Canucks. They won 4-1, but it looked like the series was going to end right then and there. But from Game 2 onward, and especially in Game 2, well, maybe not especially in Game 2, but in Game 2, it was a much more even series. And then in games 3, 4, and 5, even though while the Golden Knights closed this series out in 5 games, they were much closer games. And will that be the same case here in this series? In Game 1, domination, but Game 2, it was closer. The Golden Knights were potentially the better team, but it was a much closer game than Game 1. Will Game 3, 4, and 5 be the same thing? Is it the Golden Knights really starting off these series quite well, but maybe easing back a bit, laying back a bit? I don't know what the case here is, but it's not necessarily a great sign to have this bit of a fall off in both series from Game 1 to Game 2. But that will do it for this recap. In terms of predictions, I had said the Lightning would win in 7 games. The series is tied at 1, and as I've pointed out multiple times, this series will almost certainly go the distance, so the prediction is looking solid. And when it comes to the Golden Knights versus the Canucks, I had said the Golden Knights in 6. The Canucks getting a game doesn't necessarily go against that. I still think that will pan out pretty well. Class dismissed.